I'm glad to be joining you this morning, and my intention today is to talk generally about the native plant and seed industry and outline some ideas for connecting with Kentucky landscape industry professionals to increase your confidence in managing and improving your success with native plantings used in your stormwater control projects. The basic outline of the talk is a review of Kentucky natives, an overview of typical landscape businesses, and then to sketch out some basic recommendations that may be useful to you in connecting with the native plant and landscape industries. I plan to start with a simple life cycle of these types of plantings. As you can imagine, the types of plant material used in the planting influence establishment and inform the seasonal care required. In a high biodiversity planting, one that has a combination of trees, shrubs, herbaceous perennials, and/or grasses and sedges, establishment and maintenance is more complex. A major advantage of these plantings is that they can be very attractive. The major con is that they do need a high level of care and attention. From an establishment standpoint, planting time can be in the spring, fall, or winter for dormant woody plant material, as long as the ground isn't frozen. I'll talk more about plant availability in a later slide. Maintenance tasks will include mowing adjacent manicured areas in the spring through the fall, weeding in the spring through the fall, mulching generally in the spring, and pruning, dormant in winter or on an as-needed basis, and plant replacement to maintain the aesthetics of the planting. I want to stress the importance of irrigation in spring plantings and during hot, dry summers for the first few seasons. Once well established, after about 3 years, the plantings should not require regular supplemental watering unless there's a severe drought. If the planting design is a less manicured swath of herbaceous materials, either exclusively native warm season grasses, either as a single species monoculture or mixed species with forbs and sedges, establishment and care is slightly less labor intensive and timing is more fluid. A major advantage of these plantings is that they can be economical. The major con is that they can look a little ragged at some times of the year. From an establishment standpoint, generally the optimum time for seeding native warm season grasses in Kentucky is mid-May to mid-June, when soil temperature is above 55 degrees. For many species, the optimum temperature is closer to 75 degrees. Dormant or frost seeding can be an option. Right now, in late winter, from January to March, is the time that dormant seeding can be successful as long as the site has been prepared to minimize competition. Dormant seeding in areas like corn, bean, or wheat crop fields that have been herbicide treating is very effective. In more managed existing landscapes, lawns, and other maintained areas, for example, a herbicide or other type of burn down would be needed. Seeding rates for late winter dormant seeding should be increased by about 25% to compensate for seed loss because of rot, predation, and frost heaving. Late winter, February and March, dormant seedings have an advantage of subjecting the seed to a natural cold, moist stratification period, which can have the benefit of reducing dormancy and increase forb or wildflower density in the first year. Spring seeding favors the tallgrass species. Fall seeding favors the forbs. In mixed seed plantings, timing and planting strategy can be adjusted to promote more forbs and wildflowers by drilling in native warm season grasses first and then overseeding with forbs. With seeding, washing out can be a particular issue when broadcasting, and overseeding is followed by hard rains like the conditions we've recently been experiencing across Kentucky. The primary maintenance task is mowing, and in particular, mowing height is the most critical consideration in maintenance. Timing and frequency can be a bit fluid and is often influenced by demands of neighboring property owners and other stakeholders when a specific level of tidiness is required. A general recommendation of mowing height is between 8 and 12 inches, low enough to remove a lot of the vegetation, but not so low as to damage the growing point of the plants. Timing is usually in the late summer with some flexibility between July and September to allow for some regrowth before winter. If you need to manage for wildlife habitat, avoid nesting times for maintenance activities. Winter mowing is an option when conditions are dry enough to get into the planted area. Avoid mowing later than mid-February to prevent damaging new growth. Frequency of mowing can change over time with successful establishment. In the first year, plantings can benefit from multiple cuttings to encourage tillering, then annually or every other year once plants are established. Alternatives to mowing include controlled burning, herbicide burn down, and strip disking. These may not be options, however, depending on where and how large your plantings are. Something to consider with these plantings is that the plant composition will change over time, depending on the initial mix and competition. More vigorous species, including weeds, can outcompete less vigorous species. In the next few slides, I'll cover a few notes on sourcing native plant materials. First, plants and plugs, which can be woody or herbaceous plant material. Live plant material options are extensive, and many established nurseries are located here in Kentucky. Seed is generally an economical option for establishing native plantings and is suitable for large-scale projects of herbaceous plant material, particularly the native grasses and forbs. There are only a few seed production companies in Kentucky. You might hear the word nativar, which is a cultivar of a native plant with reliable characteristics like height, color, or shape. Another word that may be new to you is ecotype. This refers to seed or plants that have genetically evolved and adapted to a very specific microclimate. Several notes on sourcing live native plants, which can be woody or herbaceous plant material. Bare root options are common for woody plants, but also some herbaceous plants are sold where the soil is shaken or washed from the root systems of dormant plants. This material can be economical because of reduced weight for shipping. Plants can be held in a cooler and should be planted pretty soon after delivery before the plants start leafing out. Container grown plants range from small pots, 2 to 4 inches, to gallon or much larger sizes. These plants are grown in a well-drained substrate of materials like compost, pine bark, peat moss, sand, vermiculite, or perlite. These plants, ranging from herbaceous to woody plants, can be held for a period of time as long as the plants are kept consistently watered. Plugs are smaller plant material grown in a similar substrate, usually sold in flats of 32, 50, or 72. These plants should be transplanted as soon after delivery as possible. Plugs can be held in trays if watered well and not allowed to continue growing to the point of being root bound. The compact size allows for an economical way to create masses and drifts to create a naturalized appearance. The last type of plant material is balled and burlapped, or B&B. This is usually woody plant material, trees and shrubs, and may be quite large in size. Plants are usually dug dormant in late winter, extracting the root system encased in the native soil. These plants can be quite heavy and difficult to handle, requiring special equipment. B&B plants are often expensive, but lend immediate maturity to a planting. More on seed to familiarize you with the lexicon if you haven't worked with this planting material in the past. First, I want to talk about flowability. This relates to the smoothness of seed coats. Think of seed kinds like wheat or soybeans. These seed types have extremely smooth outer coverings and are easy to plant using mechanical seeders. Many of the forbs, like partridge pea or purple prairie clover, have high flowability. Many native grass species, like Indian grass, big or little bluestem, have appendages called beards or awns that are effective in facilitating dispersal of seed, but will clog seeders and require more specialized equipment for seeding. Seeds may be debearded, like on the left, or more chaffy, like on the right in the petri dish. Next up is seed tags. All seeds sold in the U.S. must have a seed tag with very specific information as required by the Federal Seed Act and the Kentucky Seed Laws and Regulations. Information that must be listed on the tag includes the seed kind, in this example, Blue Grandma, and a variety or ecotype, in this example, Bad River, and a lot number for identification and traceability. A lab purity analysis will determine pure seed, inert matter, weed and other crop seed, and any noxious weeds present. In the case of a mix, the different seed kinds are listed on a percentage by weight basis. A riparian mix, for example, suitable for steep slopes, boggy areas, and areas with running water, may include 20 or more different species of native grasses or wildflowers. A laboratory viability analysis will determine the percent germination and dormant and/or hard seed. Germination is what we can expect to sprout now, and dormant and/or hard seed may germinate at a point in the future once the dormancy releasing conditions have been met. Other information found on the seed tag include the origin, net weight, and test date. The test date is important more from a germination standpoint, which will change over time, particularly when a high percentage of dormancy is present in the seed lot. Native seed are often sold on a pure live seed or PLS basis, which is a calculation using the purity analysis and a germination percentage. Seeding rates may be adjusted based on PLS to achieve the required stand. Depending on the type of planting you intend to establish and the current use of the existing site, the prep work will be a little different. A simple herbicide burn down or close mowing can be adequate if you're drilling in or broadcasting seed. If your planting plan is more managed and complex, depending on the size, you may be able to use heavy tarps to kill existing vegetation, use a herbicide, or complete sod removal may be necessary. Some equipment that is very useful in establishing native plantings. When seeding, small areas can be hand seeded or seed can be broadcast using a pull behind unit on an ATV or UTV. For larger areas, a seed drill is useful. Native seed drills, like the Truax brand, are useful for chaffy seed kinds. More flowable seed kinds can be planted using traditional seeders. This equipment may be available to rent or borrow locally. General planting depth is 1/4 of an inch, and good seed to soil contact is necessary for successful establishment. One of the most common cases of failure in native seed establishment is planting too deeply. Hydroseeding is a less common method of planting native species, but may be useful on slope, hard to reach, or hard to navigate sites. A slurry of seeds is mixed with paper, straw, or other fibrous material with a tackifier and are applied using a piece of equipment called a hydromulcher, hydroseeder, or hydraulic planter. There are some companies in eastern Kentucky and western Kentucky that specialize in road work and have experience seeding strip mine sites. Planting of bare root plugs, container, and B&B material can be accomplished with a combination of hand and mechanical tools. Planting depth is important with these plant materials where the initial and final soil level should match. That was a lot of material quickly. Let's transition now to generalizations of the landscape industry. Let me talk a little bit about the maintenance approach and/or philosophy of different operations in Kentucky. Keep in mind these are very general descriptions, and firms may offer a range of services either on a routine basis or upon request or in response to a bid. Most firms in Kentucky are what we would consider to be traditional lawn landscape firms. They may engage in design, build projects and installation or simple mowing maintenance. These firms I would classify as having traditional turfgrass management approaches. They are more familiar with highly manicured projects. The expertise would be a uniform surface and focus on mowing, trimming, and may offer a range of services from pest management to fertility and nutrient management. These firms may offer a few other services like snow removal. For your highly managed plantings that are more ornamental in nature, a traditional landscape firm may be a good option. The installation and maintenance tasks are very similar and use traditional, widely available equipment, just the plant material is different. An increasingly popular alternative approach is sustainable landscape maintenance. Highly specialized firms may have an interest in native plantings, installation and maintenance of mixed species, including grasses, herbaceous, and woody material. These firms may be a suitable option for your projects that are more prairie-like with native warm season grasses, forbs, and sedges, requiring specialized equipment like high clearance mowers and a particular level of management. Commercial services you can engage range from design only to design build to maintenance only. Traditional lawn landscape services include mowing and trimming to more specialized services. Depending on the type of planting you have, a highly ornamental mixed species planting, for example, will require much more maintenance, mulching, weeding, and pruning, for example, to keep that highly manicured appearance. Newly planted areas may require watering until well established. Some non-routine or special services a firm may offer include aeration and overseeding, pest control, and sod installation. Spring and fall cleanup of planting beds, inventory mapping where species present are identified and geolocated. For more prairie-like settings, a controlled burn may be needed to manage or rejuvenate a planting, and some species removal, particularly invasive species, may be offered by some businesses. In this third section of the talk, let's transition to some general recommendations to engage with the local landscape industry. Tips for success. Do your basic pre-work and take the time to outline what you want before you start talking to companies and asking or putting the project out for bid. For example, do you need help with site planning, design, and plant selection? For more complex projects, you may need a more experienced or specialized firm. Do you have a final site plan from a landscape designer, landscape architect, or engineer and ready to execute? Or do you have an existing planting and just need a maintenance contract? Carefully consider your budget and always add a cushion if possible for unexpected expenses. Be realistic depending on the complexity, frequency of care, and site considerations. Lastly, consider your timeline. Do you have a deadline or special occasion, a groundbreaking or ribbon cutting date that is important? Be realistic considering weather delays, supply chain issues, availability of plant material, and scheduling constraints. When looking for a landscape professional for your project, check in with your professional network. Your colleagues may be willing to share experience and recommendations. Use the internet to your advantage. Do a general Google search. Here are a few keywords that may help you find a firm with more of a focus on sustainable landscape management. Check social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, for example. Firms and or owners who are passionate about using natives generally will highlight that in their online communications. You'll see language that reflects that, as well as images of successful installations or projects. Cross-reference with native plant suppliers to see testimonials and or reviews. If you're working with a landscape architect or designer, they may have an installation crew or recommendations for trusted companies they've worked with and recommend. Several trade or professional member organizations an operation may mention or list in their promotional materials include the Kentucky Nursery and Landscape Association, KNLA, the Kentucky Arborist Association, KAA, the Louisville Nursery Association, LNA, the Central Kentucky Ornamental and Turf Association, SACOTA, Professional Grounds Management Society, PGMS, the National Association of Landscape Professionals, NALP, the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, and the Perennial Plant Association. A few certifications and or qualifications a contractor may mention and what that means. The Kentucky Department of Agriculture pesticide license, generally Category 3, this certification allows the firm to buy and apply restricted use pesticides. The International Society of Arboriculture, ISA, Certified Arborist or Registered Consulting Arborist, RCA, this credential shows a high level of expertise in tree care. You may see Kentucky Certified Nurseryman listed. This program was discontinued in 2019. However, there is a searchable list on the KNLA website of industry members who completed the certification program. Something else you may see is Master Gardener and or Master Naturalist. These are volunteer programs and indicate successful completion of a series of educational modules. These are not industry credentials. A few questions to ask a landscape contractor or maintenance firm before hiring when possible. Can you easily meet the demands of the contract? Be sure the language in the RFP, RFA is clear and discuss in detail if possible with contractors interested in bidding on the project. When possible, include language that specifies sourcing requirements. For example, the size of plant material. Can you use small plugs or sprigs versus containerized plants in quarts, gallons, or larger? You might define a local sourcing radius, ecotype seed from hyperlocal or regional sources. Take advantage of any flexibility to write in specific qualifications to ensure the end result is what you need. A second question is, what services does the business and or contract cover? Specifics to ask about include irrigation at planting to reduce transplant shock and ensure successful establishment. Are there any guarantees and warranties that may be transferable from the production nursery that ensures the material is pest-free, both from a disease and noxious weed standpoint? For larger plant material like trees and shrubs, a 6-month or 1-year guarantee may be included, and plants may be replaced if mortality is high. Generally, for seeding projects, a guarantee is not included. The last question is, what ideas do you have? Before finishing interviewing a contractor, you might inquire as to their thoughts and ideas. There may be options or maintenance strategies you haven't considered yet that may work well, be less expensive, or may better fit your needs. Native plantings can be both attractive and functional. A few things I want to point out to help you manage expectations with native plantings. You might ask how long it will take for plants to reach a mature size. This is important, particularly if you're less familiar with the different species used in the installation. Frequently, installations use plugs or small container sizes, which are less expensive and can have reduced transplant shock that will reduce mortality in the landscape. Most new installations look a little sparse initially and a little bedraggled from transportation, handling, and planting. With time and care, the plants fill into the design. If you do want or need a more mature installation or greater ground coverage, discuss it with the contractor early. You may be able to concentrate on a particular focal or sensitive area with some larger plant material and then fill in with smaller plants or seeded areas. Availability of the spec'd plants will impact the size and species that you can source locally. Be aware that seeded projects often have slow germination, and non-uniform emergence can create disappointment and a potential eyesore in a highly visible area. Maybe use signage to inform stakeholders of the project to minimize negative feedback and ensure community support. Weed control is a constant concern in both highly managed and more natural plantings. Cool and warm season weed species, brambles, thistles, multiflora rose, and noxious weeds like Johnson grass can outcompete desirable species. Weeds can be a significant issue, especially where cultivation has disturbed the seed bank and brought weed seeds to the surface. Project costs can vary based on the complexity of the plan. Historic estimates from the EPA estimates installation cost of $2,000 to $4,000 per acre for seeding native grasses and forbs on public lands. Planting plugs or larger plant material will considerably increase material and installation costs. Based on recent farm estimates developed at the University of Missouri, establishing an acre of native warm season grasses for forage purposes will cost about $140. The general breakdown includes seed, a 20 species riparian mix at $64.20 per pound, custom hire mowing at $25 per acre, no-till drill rental at $21 an acre, and operator labor at $18.50 an acre. USDA and RCS equip reimbursement payments support this figure at about $147. Brush management, another service, is listed in the schedule at $522, which would be very similar to invasive species removal. I mention this because there are contractors who do conservation work and have equipment, high clearance mowers or seed drills, for example, that are suitable for establishing and maintaining warm season grass areas. This group could be interested in your projects and have a high level of familiarity with natives and managing warm season grass plantings. There are clearly challenges with the landscape industry and robust use of native species for different applications. For example, there's limited availability of appropriate plant material. There are several nurseries and seed companies in Kentucky and across the region, but often the species and sizes specified for projects may not be available. Minimal knowledge of plant material and site considerations. Most landscape companies are familiar with typical turfgrass species, tall fescue, fine fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and ryegrasses, for example, but are less familiar with the range of native grasses, forbs, and sedges. These firms may do well with highly managed ornamental plantings. Likely, they will be less familiar and less successful with naturalized prairie-like plantings. Labor is a challenge that can impact the availability of firms to complete work. There's a lot of churn in the industry with long hours, hard work, and low pay, creating high employee turnover. Language can be a barrier. Many businesses employ guest workers and H-2B employees who are not native English speakers. Employee onboarding and training is ongoing at these firms. Because of these challenges and others, there can be a low level of professionalism. In the trade, this is often referred to as the mow, blow, and go mentality. A few ways we at UK and the professional member organizations try to mitigate some of these challenges is to host educational events. For example, the Turf Short Course is happening right now. The KNLA, LNA, and Sakota offer winter and summer educational meetings. Development of multilingual resources and the launch of workforce training programs are efforts to increase professionalism and knowledge in the industry. We are always open to ideas if you have suggestions. As you develop projects and have conversations with potential contractors, I'm confident that you'll be able to determine the best fit for your project. Be as clear as possible with what you need for the project. Really scrutinize the bid and subsequent contracts, and have patience and a sense of humor when the project starts. In conclusion, help us help you. What resources would be most valuable? Please drop any suggestions you have into the chat. This could include things like an interactive nursery locator for operations that specialize in the production of native plants, plant lists organized by site suitability, or in-person trainings. Thank you so much for your time and attention.